Welcome to the Future of Education. I'm Michael Horn, joined by a friend of mine, Doug Curtin, the Director of Content for the company Platform. I'm personally excited for this conversation, not just because I'm sporting the shirt, but because Platform is a company that got birthed out of the CrossFit gym where I work out, and has a mission that's super important to me personally. So Doug, first, welcome to the show. And I'd love you to start off by telling those watching, what is Platform? What do you all represent, and how do you work?
Sure. Well, thanks first off, Michael, thanks for having me. We've had you on a few different things of ours, so it's nice for the tables to be flipped and me being.
I get to ask you now. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Usually I ask you the question. So like Michael said, our company's name is Platform, PLT4M for short. And we were founded, like Michael said, sort of out of the upstairs office of a gym. And primarily we're working with high schools to deliver kind of a technology solution for fitness education, strength and conditioning, being able to personalize each individual's experience so that, the freshman that walks into the weight room for the first time isn't being tasked to do the same thing as someone who's maybe a senior and has been in there for 4 years. So our company has really shifted over the last few years, and especially in the last few months, particularly with COVID. But really what we aim to do is serve high schools' physical education programs and athletic programs with kind of that progressional approach to training and learning. So we want to make sure that we meet students when they first get to the gym or to physical education or to a fitness center, and they learn the fundamentals. And that's learning how to do an air squat, a lunge, a push-up, a press, a pull. And I think we a lot of times assume that kids just know how to do that. But much like just about anything else, technique, form, and everything else like that might be a little bit off. We also want to promote kind of that lifelong ability for fitness and learning, because past high school, we want students to be able to walk into a gym, walk into the YMCA, and feel comfortable and confident that they can continue being fit for the rest of their lives. So really our goal as a company is to be able to give teachers and coaches resources that allow them to do that in physical education class or before and after school, whatever the setting may be, so that as they go through all of those different modules and programs that we provide, they have access to instructional videos, instructional notes, different types of supplemental resources in terms of learning about basics of nutrition and all of those different components that kind of feed into a healthy lifestyle that we know is so important, not only for students, but also as we kind of move on from high school into the next steps of their lives, that they have those tools to succeed.
So it's an awesome mission. I mean, health and lifelong learning around health and being a healthy individual is something that I think is incredibly important, incredibly overlooked in our schooling.
Sure.
Physical education teachers that are on the front lines of this often honestly don't get the due respect that they need to around this. I'd love you, before we get into the COVID moment and sort of what you're seeing right now, one more question, which is so what you're doing is essentially flipping the classroom, if you will, in some ways, and creating the technology for this infrastructure. But talk a little bit more about it, because I think some people sometimes hear technology, physical education, and they're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how do these things go together?
Right. And I think sometimes people will hear like, oh, physical education is the time for students to put their phones down, to put technology down, to be able to be active. And what we hear a lot from physical education teachers is that we're not physical activity teachers. We're not just wanting to get kids up and moving without any educational components to it. So we want to instill like the actual learning how to do different things within physical education so that students can do it when they don't have a teacher in front of them or they don't have it. And when you talk about flipping the classroom, especially in physical education, like you said, we're talking about class sizes that are up to 40, 50 students in a class. And so you're tasking a teacher with something that's nearly impossible, and that's providing each and every student that personalized experience that they're able to succeed within. So flipping the classroom a little bit, we've decided and been able to use instructional videos in different ways that students will have access to technology. It could be on their smartphone. If students have one-to-one Chromebooks, anything else like that, that they're navigating through lessons with instructional videos, and they're able to kind of take that guided approach, whether they're in that fitness center, they're using equipment, or even in some of those basic programs, they're going through all body weight movements. What that allows a teacher to often be able to do is go throughout the classroom and address the students that need a little bit more personalized attention. Hey, Michael, I noticed that you're on the squat portion and you're having trouble with that point of performance of having your knees track over your toes. So that's an example right there that the kids are getting that instruction within the videos, within the notes. And the teacher is now able to navigate the classroom and be able to help individual students that might be struggling with things. Now, of course, the teacher can set the stage, and there's different ways that, you can use this. They'll bring kids back for maybe a finisher or a workout of the day where we all get together and we do something. But through that kind of technology piece of things, it actually frees the teacher up a little bit more to be able to insert themselves into situations where they can help, rather than being that traditional style. I'm at the front of the classroom leading 30, 40, 50 kids, as we know can be so challenging, and rather start to be kind of that facilitator of more personalized learning.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's the perfect purpose for technology to actually make the human interaction more valuable, not less.
Sure.
And you also probably have been hearing my own coaches telling me about my knees tracking over my over my toes on landing on snatches.
That was a personal.
Yeah, you just nailed it there. But the question, I guess, that I want to move to then is, so COVID hits, all of a sudden, families are at home, they're not in the school buildings. And I'm hearing at a lot of districts, sort of physical education teachers kind of been sidelined in this moment, that they're not sort of on the front lines interacting with students. And I guess from my perspective, and I'll put my bias out there, and I love what you're seeing, is that actually physical fitness is an incredibly important part of building a routine right now for kids in this stressful time. And it should be a core part of their learning. What like react to that, but also what are you seeing? What are your customers doing?
Yeah, that's a great point. And unfortunately, that is the case in a lot of school districts. It's, we often have seen it before COVID hit, where math, science, English, and those types of subjects always took kind of that upper echelon and top tier performance. And physical education often has to kind of fight to be on the same tier as them. And hitting COVID, that was no different. But as you said, it's not new to us. It's not, new information to know that students that participate in routine physical activity do better, both mentally, physically, in all aspects of their life. I'm not just saying, hey, Michael, you improved your overall fitness and therefore you look better or you feel better. But Michael, you improved your overall fitness and now you're doing a better job in your math class, your English class. You're able to connect all of those pieces. So when we look at physical education as sort of a second tier subject, it's tough because we want to understand that if you don't have that aspect of your education and your learning, all of those other things are already going to be kind of lapsed, right? We're already going to be struggling with those different types of things. So to answer your question of what we're seeing is there's a lot of physical education teachers out there, and there's a lot of us here advocating for the fact that students that are going to be participating in a continued physical education, and that's not just, as I said, getting your heart rate up and working out, it's learning all of those different types of things. It's going to start to play in those other aspects of their life. And you mentioned, stress and mental fatigue and everything else like that. We all know the value of being able to kind of just work out, exercise, and get kind of the blood flowing. And I won't dive too much into the science of it because that's not my domain here at Platform. There's other smarter folks in the company that focus on those different types of things. But, the CDC, as we listen to them about COVID and everything else like that, often also advocate for not only students, but adults having a certain amount of activity and exercise in their daily lives that's not just going to benefit their physical well-being, but also their mental well-being as well. So as I meander kind of that long-winded answer to your kind of original question of what teachers are doing, is what they're now looking to do is provide resources and opportunities that kids can work out at home. So they might not have access to a gym. They might not have access to workout equipment, but that doesn't mean that we have to just say, hands in the air, students can no longer exercise. We, within Platform ourselves have created a lot of instructional videos over just the last few months. That's, hey, let's say you don't know or can't do a push-up from the ground because it's too difficult for your strength. Well, you have a couch that probably has a back. That's one level. The arms are another level, and maybe the front is another level. So let's start on the back and let's have that most elevated surface push-up. And then we'll start to work around the couch and get better and stronger to the point that maybe we can go from the ground. Or another example, Michael, for your squat that you might be struggling with is, you're not sure if you're going through that full range of motion. You're not sure if your butt is sinking below parallel, which is one of those points of performance. let's again use that couch and use it as a target, as a form of feedback, because what students are lacking are teachers or other students that might be able to say, hey, I notice you're struggling with this, or I'm watching you and I'm going to give you some feedback that you're not squatting all the way down. Obviously, with kids at home, they might not get that feedback. So we're talking about just taking household items and being able to give that same type of feedback as well within it.
Super smart. It's something that I've been pushing teachers, is to recognize that each child is going to have a unique home environment now, not just their own unique needs, and personalizing the learning and the program, if you will, around that.
Right.
A question that I'm curious about, because I've heard from other folks that have effectively platform education companies, not PLT 4M, but platforms with content preloaded, projects maybe, and things like that throughout the entire year. That when when the schools that they work with sent kids home, that it was a lot easier for continuity of learning to occur. Yeah. Because sort of the work was already there and kids knew what to do, right? And I'm curious, have you seen something similar in the schools that you work with, that they're much more likely to keep physical education going than maybe other schools that haven't had your solution installed?
Sure. So, every teacher and every school and every administration is obviously going to work to do their best. They're going to hope to be able to provide something in the form of physical education as students go home. But to your question, we currently, or right when COVID hit, worked with about 700 high schools, middle schools as well. And what we found was they were able to quickly shift. They're familiar with the technology, they're familiar with the app, they're familiar with the interface, and they're able to kind of click and go to be able to then work out and do different fitness modules and routines from home. That was great, right? And they were able to make that quick transition. Now, additionally, we had a lot of schools signing up. And what's nice, as we've often talked about, is many students, especially in this generation, are relatively familiar with technology, and so they can pick it up quickly. And so because it's not this crazy complicated app or anything else like that, they're able to download it, get signed up, and they're able to quickly know, all right, this is the program I need to follow, and I'm able to kind of go along the way. So I think the biggest thing in terms of just kind of using a platform, if you will, versus kind of these ad hoc solutions, is that everything is kind of in one location. And so a lot of folks were finding YouTube links here, or they were finding different routines there, and they were trying to send them out via email, or they were trying to send them out via an LMS or whatever it may be. And it was somewhat disjointed. And so something like Platform, to answer your question, whether it was a school that had been using it at that brick and mortar school and then transitioned remote, or they picked it up for the first time, it kind of brought all of that together, right? They could send everything out via this system, as opposed to having to grab and pull from all of these different places and feeling like now students who are already overwhelmed, they're already getting assignments from a million different things, and they're already being asked to do all of these different Zoom meetings, and the list went on. Okay, here's a really kind of stress-free solution to be able to say, everything's loaded up. When you open up the app, you're going to know what to do, as opposed to being kind of bombarded with all of these different places of where they were supposed to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the management for students and families of all that bombardment, as you will, has been something that's really taxed them, and I think caused them to say, I'm out, right? In many cases from the school year. I'm curious, what are you hearing from the PE teachers directly that you work with around these issues?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges for PE teachers, as I mentioned before, is being able to monitor and keep students accountable. As we all know, there's a benefit to going to a location to somewhat kind of say, the people around me are holding me accountable. Michael, you and I go to a gym down the street, and it's the aspect of, you could do any of those workouts on your own, but it's kind of this nice thing of knowing that I can do this with my friends or my buddies or my colleagues or my dad. I go work out with him because I have that connection and other people around me holding me accountable. So that same thing goes for fitness, activity, and physical education teachers right now, is worrying, okay, when no one else is around, how do we hold students accountable to making sure that they do go through, the guided warm-up, that they do go through the workout routine and hit all of its kind of subsequent parts. What's nice about using an app like Platform is that it has kind of a timestamp within it. So you'd have to really game the system to get around the fact that you have to have the app open and you have to be clicking through it. Now, obviously, at times you put your phone down to go do that movement, But the physical education teachers, that's kind of the number one thing, is I want to make sure that students are actively engaged throughout this and they're not sort of just sitting on their couch, leaned back and sort of clicking through the app, if you will. So there's obviously fail safes within that in making sure that we log things. We do pre and post testing. We kind of do routine assessments throughout so that students know, hey, we want to see how you're doing and we also want to see you make that individual progress. Additionally, what a lot of PE teachers are using are they're sort of supplementing not only the physical activity learning that we do a lot of times in physical education and introducing those different types of things, but also doing a lot of the cognitive stuff as well. So I mentioned nutrition. We have a great nutrition program that we kind of outlined and detailed, and there are assignments within it. So there's areas for open response and there's areas for interaction within that nutrition, which we know is an important part of that physical well-being. Additionally, there's a lot of times where we've had podcasts and different instructional videos that really dive into the details and the science behind exercise science and things like that. And our director of performance, Sam Breslin, went through a lot of those and created questions and answers as well. So students could sort of express learning in that way. So it's not just activity based. It's also starting to kind of take in the other aspects of making sure that we have that kind of holistic learning experience within physical education. And for PE teachers, that's important because maybe someone might not make it through their full workout at home because, they get caught up or they get distracted or whatever else. But there are some ways that we can have some more structured check-ins to know that kind of those different elements of learning exist.
Gotcha. As we fast forward into the fall and school districts increasingly, it looks like, are going virtual. Most of them, I think, are going remote at this point,
Sure.
Over 50% from the latest numbers that I've seen. What are you seeing among your customers? What's school going to look like? What's PE going to look like in the fall? Schools have had a lot more time to think about it.
Sure. And it's certainly a busy time here for us as schools are thinking about getting going and making the shift and everything else like that. I think one thing that's really nice to see within physical education, especially understanding that we're returning to school, is that we're not just looking to send a workout home to a student. As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, Michael, is because there are students that need a foundation of fitness. It's the same thing. You wouldn't teach calculus before algebra. Not every student at home should be doing the same workout, just as they shouldn't have been doing it within their physical education class or within the fitness center or weight room or whatever it may be. So the big focus right now is that we need that differentiation. So we have great introductory programs that go over scaling that I talked about, that go over introducing kind of different equipment and things like that. And you can do a lot of that at home as well. You don't have a weight, that's okay. Take a backpack and use it as sort of a loaded up object. And that, as we progress students through, they can get comfortable with those different movements, get comfortable with those different things, and they don't necessarily see a weight room. So what schools are really trying to focus on right now, and I think we see it making sure that we do this at home, is just because physical education is at home doesn't mean we go back to keeping it all the same across the board. We can give those freshmen that are brand new to learning and those movements that Intro 101 program. Let's guide them through with instructional videos so that they know the expectations around technique and everything else. Maybe there's a student athlete that's still waiting for that season to come, whenever it may be, or is thinking about the next level. There's a different program for them. We want to make sure that they have kind of that personalized experience within physical education or whatever it may be. And for someone, as we've said, knows the importance of fitness, or we're trying to instill that importance of lifelong fitness, there's a kind of fun pull and play program that exists as well. So there's something for everyone. And I think for teachers, they want to make sure that they get that out to those different groups and don't just kind of go back to saying, hey, everybody's going to get the same thing within physical education, because we know that's not the appropriate thing, whether we're in school or at home. So it's been busy. There's a lot of schools obviously looking to make that shift. And also, I think one last thing that's really important to note, Michael, is that there's a lot of teachers, I think, when this first hit in COVID, that sort of said, okay, like we'll have a Zoom class and we'll go through a lesson together. Or I want to make sure my kids are doing something, so I'm going to have them send me videos of them doing work from home. A lot of different problems arose from that, right? Not everyone has access to be able to join the Zoom right at 12 o'clock and be able to go through a workout, because maybe they're parents aren't home and they're watching their kids, so they can't be necessarily breaking out a sweat, but they could do it earlier or later. And what's nice is I think a lot of teachers know I'm going to provide these resources. I'm going to give them all the tools, and then I can check in with them because I'll see their activity being logged. I'll see their work being logged, and I'll know that, hey, maybe, I need to reach out to Sarah, who hasn't been logging throughout the week, and see if she's planning on doing it later in the week, or maybe she needs to kind of have a different system set up. Maybe it's not the right program. Maybe she needs a little bit of extra help. Whatever that may be, we can navigate those because we have that foundation set up and we have that technology to be able to use as a tool and be able to address those kind of more one-off situations, if you will.
Makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, if we shift, schools are trying to figure out what that schedule could look like. You just gave one concrete piece of advice, which is, not everything has to be synchronous, right? They can take advantage of different schedules for different kids and so forth. What's your advice to schools? How should they do this well?
Sure. And I think the most important thing is, as I kind of mentioned before, is that, there are a lot of students who are going to need the basics. And as much as that we want to kind of rush ahead and pick up where we left off, it's an understanding that a lot of kids, and I see it myself, I work with a lot of different groups of students as a coach in a few local public schools around here. Even though you have a junior or senior, that doesn't necessarily mean that their experience level matches what you might expect. And so sometimes always going back to square one and reviewing foundational movements and everything else like that, that's a really great way to kind of lead everybody in and make sure that they're comfortable. But I think from an advice perspective, as we've heard from a lot of teachers, and I'm only regurgitating what I've kind of talked to with PE teachers from across the country and articles that I've kind of helped write with the department chair who's been there for 30 years or the teacher who's now in charge of making sure this all works, is that especially with a vulnerable subject like physical education, with getting kids active, getting kids kind of breaking a sweat and everything else like that, is I think the most important thing is that people feel safe and people have fun. Because if in the first few weeks we throw these crazy different expectations out at students, as you mentioned earlier, I don't think they're going to come back, right? They're going to probably just avoid doing that because they don't want to go through that process again. Or the second I went to do a push-up from the ground, because that was the only way I was able to do it, I failed. We want to make fitness something that we feel successful in. We want to make physical education something that everybody feels like there's a way in which they can go about doing it, that they enjoy and they have fun, because it's the same thing as adults, as I keep going back to. If we're looking to prepare students to be able to do this on their own when they graduate from high school or whatever else may be, I don't go play ice hockey because I'm not very good at skating. I don't go play tackle football because it hurts and I'm not meant for that. What we're looking to do is give students the opportunities to know, okay, this is fun, this is manageable, and giving them those different avenues and introducing them to new things. So I haven't mentioned this yet, but we have a great mastering mobility program, and it's these guided yoga sessions. So for someone who says, I don't love these workouts that have air squats and push-ups and everything else like that, we're introducing different ways that you can stay active, you can stay healthy and stay fit, because it might not always be in that workout that we prescribe for a given day or that activity we assign in a given day. It might be something else. So those different opportunities, I think, is one of the most important things we can do, is giving them different avenues in which they can all succeed. And you know what? At the end of the day, some people still might not like it, but if they get their heart rate up, they get feeling good, their other aspects of their life start to click, they might be able to make that connection that physical education is helping them out.
Perfect. So let's turn to the other side of the coin now for parents who are maybe tuning in, watch this at some point, and they're thinking, maybe their school's not on platform, right? What's your big advice to them? How should they treat this moment with their children?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that's one of the biggest things that I can even say for teachers, and I can say for myself, because sometimes, when working with some of my kids, I realize that, this workout today is just not it for them. And I will just know that someone's going to benefit from taking an hour-long walk. Hey, leave your phone, go take a walk, and just kind of do that for your activity today. And I think that's important for all of us to understand, is that maybe, your son or daughter goes and shoots the basketball for 30 minutes outside and just kind of fleshes out. Now, is that physical education? No, but the aspect of kind of getting moving and everything else like that can be helpful. And of course, basketball can be part of a physical education curriculum, but you understand sort of the delineation of activity versus that education piece. So for parents, I think the biggest thing, and as I've seen it with working with my kids, is that, hounding them to just go do the workout never has really worked. And it's more so asking, hey, what's up? Like, why aren't you doing this? Why is it not going the way that you want it to? What can be different? And what can be, maybe it's just, I don't necessarily want to work out in my living room and my brother and sister are hounding me and I want to go outside, and I can only do that, when it's not 100 degrees out in the middle of a heat wave. So there are all those different things that we have to, hypothetically. So I think that we often kind of just assume that something gets assigned and it's going to get done. And we just assume that they're going to kind of work through those different things. But again, part of what physical education about, especially for middle school and high school students, is that aspect of probably getting outside of a physical comfort zone and a mental comfort zone. That's hard for a lot of people. So as a parent, if I'm seeing my kid go do a workout or try something new or give it a go for the first time, I mean, it's got to be met with excitement, right? That's awesome that you gave that, jump rope a try. You wiped off the dust in the garage and you tried the jump rope for the first time, kind of meeting with that supportive nature. And then the other thing is obviously just make sure your kids are being safe. We don't want kids doing anything crazy, especially if they start to take loaded objects and they're throwing them around or anything else like that. I think one of the big things that I've realized is that there's a lot of people that have become fitness gurus and health gurus over the last couple of months with COVID. And you want to make sure that you're pulling resources from the right spots. Platform is obviously one of them, in that it's research-based and there's a lot of great stuff. And by no means is Platform the only one. You could go find other things that are great, but if it's a YouTube page and it feels a little bit off and it feels a little bit sketchy when it comes to what is being talked about or what's being taught, you might run into a problem. And I will say one last thing, and I sorry to belabor the point, but the other thing is about kind of that image and things is that, there's a lot of things out there where people got their shirts off and people are, like barely clothed and drenched in sweat. And I don't know if that's always the greatest thing for a middle schooler or high schooler to be introduced to for the first time. And we go through a lot of videos and we're cognizant of making sure that it's, age appropriate. But for a high school student to see that and think, oh, I don't look like that, that's not the most empowering thing for them to go say, I'm going to go do the same workout that, insert fitness model is doing with,
it's a really good point,
barely any clothes on. So I don't mean to be, kind of a stickler there and sound like I'm an old fogey, but I think that is an important part, especially when we're working with middle and high school students. So
no, it's a really good point. So last question, switching gears a little bit, which is, Platform, the company. We've heard a lot of ed tech companies, they've just been booming during these times because all of a sudden people are recognizing the importance of technology and education and what it can do. Companies like Coursera just exploding in growth.
Yep.
What are you all seeing for you all that you're at liberty to discuss?
Sure, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing, as we discussed, is sometimes physical education has kind of been second fiddle in a lot of ways. And so when money comes up for new tech initiatives in a lot of places, it goes to math or science or some of those other subjects. But because a lot of school districts and because a lot of states are recognizing the importance of physical education at home, I think some of that money is starting to shift towards PE and doing things that will keep kids, active at home, because we just can't let COVID be an excuse to see obesity rates and other things that are already super high and already super prevalent get any worse than they are. It just can't be the way that we go. It really can't. And I think what's nice with all of this going on, as you mentioned, the silver lining is that physical education is getting a second look and people are understanding just how important that it is. Because with that, as you mentioned, we've seen a number of schools sign on and say, let's start this at the middle school level. We used to start at the high school level, but now more than ever, we know our middle schoolers need this type of education in the foundations. Myself, at being only a few years out of college and a few more years out of high school myself, we didn't do a lot of this type of stuff. So the progress was already kind of in the works. There was definitely a shift towards making this style of education and learning with fitness education, with technology. It was already kind of happening, and COVID's almost been a catalyst to say, let's really take a look at what we're giving each and every student, because we're not talking about athletes. We are talking about every single student at the school and giving them the resources and the tools that they can kind of hope to be fit, not only right now, but fit for life as well.
That's terrific. And it's a really important point you raised. I'm glad you did, which is that one of the things that we've seen in COVID is that those with pre-existing conditions, with diabetes, with obesity, they've been hit the hardest in this. And we're seeing that chronic disease is something you can do something about.
Sure.
You can do something about it by developing these habits and getting this education up front. And so commend you all for frankly, hopefully creating a generation, helping build a generation, educate a generation that doesn't have the same dynamics that adults in our society today do.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think the one thing that's, really almost important to highlight as well with COVID and everything else like that is that obviously, gym memberships cost money. Belonging to the state of the art of gym costs money. And what this has really proven for a lot of people is that you can take care of yourself while at home, so long as you have the resources and are creative to do it. Because, Platform is obviously a subscription for schools to purchase, and it's not an expensive one for many schools, I should add. But students are able to kind of navigate all of this just at home within the comfort or discomfort, as they start to work out a little bit, of their living room or of their basement or whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be this major financial investment to take care of yourselves. And obviously there's other things at play in terms of food access and different resources along those lines, which is worth its own conversation at a different point. But,
Sure.
the general ability to kind of dedicate an hour a day sometimes seems like it's, oh, well, anybody could just go do it. But we know a lot of kids and students in particular don't know how or don't feel comfortable doing it on their own. And so just some basic resources and guided technology and things like that can really go a long way. And I think that the end result, if I could ever find one in COVID, is that students know that no matter what, if I only have 20 minutes before I have to go to work, or I only have, a 30-minute lunch break, I can do something. Maybe it's a quick stretching routine or a yoga pose, or my back's feeling tight. Why is that? Those basic understandings as they get into their adult lives are so crucial. And I think if we can have one small sliver of success, it would be that that group of next generation students understand some of those basic things.
Well, that's a great way to end this conversation. Doug, huge thanks for coming on and check out Platform. I'll put the website on one more time, platform.com, plt4m.com.
Absolutely.
Check them out, and thanks, Doug. I really appreciate it.
Well, Michael, I got to say thank you to you as well. As everybody can see, Michael is a proud representative of the Platform gear as well, and has come into our office pre-COVID and done a workout. So I can attest that he's got the fundamentals down and is a great supporter of us. And I'm very, very appreciative of it. So thank you, Michael.
Well, hopefully we'll be back in person before too long, but thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.